was to be born again. And the Lord Jesus is trying to tell Nicodemus, look, this is what I've got in mind. You've got to be born again by my Spirit, by God's Spirit. You can't do this on your own. You don't have a natural way to reach me. I have to intervene and step in and change. I have to intervene and make you new and awaken you and recreate you. What did Paul tell the church in Corinthians, I think it was? He said to be renewed in the spirit of their minds, because sin corrupted our thinking and it corrupted our hearts, and it caused us to lose contact with our first love. And so Jesus is telling Nicodemus, you're religious, you love me, you serve me. And I don't think that Jesus may have talked to him too much if he wasn't a true servant. Referring to Nicodemus, he wouldn't have had a lot to say to him if he was one of them. He would have been speaking rather against them, because if you'll notice, he spoke this way to Nicodemus, but to the other Pharisees he seemed hard. But he couldn't get past their religious thinking. He couldn't get past that. But Nicodemus he could talk to. So he was willing to reveal to Nicodemus, look, this is what I'm looking for. You must be born again. You must be born again. And Nicodemus, thinking humanly, said, well, how's that even possible? And Jesus says, don't be surprised that I said this to you, because you can't enter the kingdom of God unless you're born of the water and of the Spirit. There's a combination. And do you know why that is? Why would Jesus say you have to be born of water and the Spirit? Because Jesus himself was sitting there born the same way. He was spirit, and he also became born in a human body for us. As an eternal and one and only sacrifice for all sin forever, for all humanity, Jesus was sitting in front of him and telling him that you must be born again. That meant that even Jesus in his human body needed the Spirit of God to keep him pure and holy, so that he would be the honorable sacrifice for the sin of humanity. And that's going to get way over there in left field if I keep going with that thought. But he's telling Nicodemus, that which is born of the flesh is only flesh. That's all it is. Anything humanly conceived, no matter how religious, is still flesh. Anything humanly thought out, no matter how wonderful and how advanced and how technological it might be, is still flesh. Anything that you can do in service, anything you can do nationwide, if you have an international ministry, it still can be flesh. But that which is born of the Spirit is spirit. That which is born of the flesh is only flesh, but only that which is born of the Spirit is really spirit. You hear this? That which is born of the flesh is only flesh, but that which is born of the Spirit is really the Spirit of God. Now we are going to come into agreement with one or the other. There is no middle ground here. There is nothing but the will of God. And that is either we are choosing the will of the Spirit or we are choosing the will of the flesh. You cannot make the flesh spiritual. You cannot make the Spirit fleshly. You have to call clean, clean, and unclean, unclean. Holy is holy and sin is sin. Or black and black is white is white, however you'd like to describe that. There's only one will that will prevail, and that is the will of God's Spirit. And there is only one way to know you are walking in the Spirit of God, is to make sure that you are in agreement with God. Here is how we are going to know what is the difference between our human thinking and if we're agreeing with God. And it basically means whomever you agree with the most. If you agree with human thinking and human reasoning the most, you may lean that way. But if you are determined to get past human thinking and boxes and settings that are comfortable for you and get over into the realm of finding out what does God agree with. And while I was on this, I couldn't help but wonder something, and I hope I'm not being too forward in mentioning this. But does anybody care what God thinks? I mean, really, so many people are saying God told them this and God told them that, and I know for a fact that's a lie. You're lying on the Lord by telling me that God told you to do this and do that, and then there's no fruit, there's no power, there's no lives changed, there's nobody's needs being met, there's no bodies being healed, there's no demons being cast out. But God told you something, but yet, well, where is the fruit? Does anybody care what God thinks? I don't know how many times I've got it written down in journals and stuff from my past and just my little old Christian life, okay? Where God has told me over and over, I want you to say only what I tell you to say and nothing else. Just only what I say. And I've got it written down at least 5 times in a journal from 2 years ago where he was just telling me, don't say nothing else except what I tell you to say. So I wonder, does anybody care how God feels when we are going crazy? When we're not praying and not talking to him, for instance? When we're not fellowshipping with him, but we're still going to the church? We might even be praying for people. I went through this season not too long ago, speaking to myself a little, I went through this season a while back where I really wasn't praying that much, but yet I was in the altars praying with people every Sunday, every Wednesday. And I didn't even know for sure after a while of doing this. At first, I'm sure God was having a little grace on me, and I kind of realized that. But I still wasn't praying that much. I just went through this thing where I just didn't say a lot to God. But he was still using me, though, and after a while I began to wonder, Lord, I've been like this for at least a couple of months now. I have just not had a desire to pray. I just haven't been talking to you. I'm sorry I've been like that, but could you help me understand what's going on and why this has come over me? And that's when he let me see that I was too worried about myself in a way. And what I mean by that is I let what people think stop me from God using me. And what happened was I wound up getting discouraged. And I know I was wrong for that now, but at the time I thought I was right to just kind of back away. Because I feel strongly that if you don't want me, I'm not there. I'm not going to force myself. I'm not an invader. That's not the kind of spirit the Lord gave me, and I don't do that. If you don't want me there, I'm gone, and I have a life to prove that, that I'm that way. But that's when the Lord started talking to me when I came to him about how he felt about what I was doing. And I began to realize that God was sharing his heart with me here. He was telling me, look, you got a lot of things right, but you got a few things that it upsets me sometimes with you. You're all courageous and everything one day, and the next day you run away. Somebody looks at you crazy, your feelings get hurt too easy. You wear your feelings on your sleeve, Harold. Now, I don't like that about you. I really wish you would get that under control because I've already delivered you, but you're not walking in it. He was telling me things like that and being straight up honest with me as I was trying to be honest with him. And I began to realize, man, I never thought about it before, but the Lord has a lot of feelings for us and about us. And I wonder if we would listen to him more and hear him from his heart and not just what he's saying and not being religious. Just listen to his heart. I wonder if that would really help us to progress in being Christians and being real examples of who God is in the world. So I ask these questions, does anybody care what God thinks? Does anybody care how he feels? I mean, do you want to know this man of sorrows or not? Do you want to know Jesus? Do you want to be born again? Jesus has promised in His Word that He's not going to turn away a single one that comes to Him, because He knows why they're coming. It doesn't take Him by surprise whenever we realize that there's a lot of things wrong with us. That didn't shock Him at all, and it certainly did not stop Him from going to the cross. Nothing that's wrong with us took Him by surprise. He knew what He was getting when He got you, and it didn't stop Him. Even after Adam and Eve sinned in the garden, God still came down and wanted to talk to them. It was the day, unfortunately, that they fell and that God had to make some judgments, but did it stop Him from coming down like He had been doing before? No, it didn't. Because He said that He was the same and He will never change His mind. The Bible tells us that He won't. He said, I change not. I do not change my ways just because of man. So if we're sitting around thinking that we've got God figured out and we try to put Him in a religious box, He's bigger than that. If we go along in our whole lives and we neglect to get to know who God really is, those are the very people that He's going to say He never knew one day. Why? Because we didn't get to know who He was. Nobody cared about what He thought. Nobody cared about how He felt. Nobody cared about what He went through in order to get us salvation, in order to redeem us from the hand of the enemy. He could have, as God, allowed us to continue on in sin. And you know and I know that the ultimate end of sin is only death. And the Bible tells us that clearly. So why in the world would we want to run after something that's going to bring us death? But do we do it? Yeah, to a certain degree we certainly do, because we haven't learned how to come out of it yet. But Jesus is coming back to that thought. I'm coming back to that thought. Jesus is saying, marvel not that I'm saying to you, you must be born again. You must be born again. Now, a lot of people say that that's a command or something like that. And in a manner of thinking or speaking, yes, it is a command and it is a requirement, yes. And you could say that truthfully. But the problem that I found with this is that that's not what's on God's heart about it. God is trying to tell us, look, you must be born again because there's a lack. There's a need. It's the same thing He was telling Nicodemus. He's like, you've got a lot of things right. You're in church. You serve. You love people. You're faithful. You're true. You're honest. You know, you got so many great qualities. But here's something that you lack. You must allow God to cause you to be born again. How does that born again process start? It started, if you look at Jeremiah 1:5, he reminded the prophet of God. He said that before I formed you in the womb, I already knew who you were. Years and years before you were born, maybe generations or hundreds of years before you were born, I already planned you out. God conceived us in His heart and in His mind way before we were ever naturally born on this earth. So you can actually say that God has your life completely planned out and organized, and He's not going to miss a beat. Now you and I can miss Him, but He won't. He already knows the plans. In Jeremiah 29:11, what does it say? I know the kind of plans I have for you, not of evil, but I want to bring you a future, a hope. I want to keep you. I want you to be strong. I want you to be with me forever. God's plan is more than just us going to heaven one day. He's got plans that go beyond that. But unfortunately for us, we'll be blessed if we can get to heaven. That may be as far as we can see. But God sees infinitely and accurately and precisely. So when He tells the prophet Jeremiah, before you were formed in the belly, I already knew who you were, that reveals that God already has mapped out our entire lives, when we were born, how we were born, the parents we had, the upbringing we have. Or even if we did not have a proper upbringing, God can still bring us out of all of that and cause us to be great, great people. And God does not make one person greater than the other. He makes all people great. So not only has He made us good people of God, He's made us great. We are kings and priests in this side if you look at Revelation 1 and 6. If you look in, I think it's Hebrews